welcome to Media MD, your weekly dose of media that you have somehow missed. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And Elliot, I've forgotten to bring something this week, so I guess that means it's your turn.
Oh, good thing I am ready.
All right, what do you
got? So this week I'm bringing you the sort of the whole book series, but especially the first one, the Bobiverse books. So the first one is We Are Legion, We Are Bob.
This is different to the Bobiverse, right?
Slightly. Just as good. Just as good. No, actually, no, that's not true. I shouldn't say that because this is really good.
Wow, slam for the Bobiverse. I mean, fair, but...
Yeah, in general, I can't say the same about the Bobiverse. It has its moments. But anyway, let's talk about the Bobiverse. So this is a series of books about a guy called Bob. And he sets himself up to be cryogenically frozen if he dies. And then he dies. And he wakes up in the future. And he sort of ends up... It starts off like Futurama.
Right.
And then but when he gets reanimated, it turns out they didn't actually know how to cure whatever illness he had, but they have figured out how to upload people into computers. So he's been put in a computer, and in fact, they're vetting him to see if he's suitable as being the first consciousness to be put into a von Neumann probe, which is a sci-fi thing. I don't know if normal people are familiar with. It's basically
From how
a
you're
probe.
describing it, it sounds like what football will look like in the future. Space satellites.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a satellite. Well, a von Neumann probe is a probe that you send out. But what it's designed to do is when it reaches like a new solar system, it sort of catalogs everything, sends it back to Earth, and then uses the resources in that solar system to build more of itself. And then launch itself out from there. So you sort of, quickly scan as much space as you can and sort of colonize everything by having self-replicating probes.
Right.
So basically, with the ability to upload him into a computer, they have like an artificial intelligence that can cope with all the crazy stuff that might happen in space. They're finally ready to start von Neumann probes, and they're trying to figure out if he's a suitable artificial intelligence.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, obviously, based on the fact that the title is called We Are Legion, We Are Bob, I don't think it's spoilers to say that he's at least moderately successful in that endeavor.
And so he builds legions of Bob probes.
Well, yeah, basically. So the premise is Bob goes out into space, catalogs space, and then makes more Bobs, and they also go out into space. And the books... at least initially from the perspective of the original Bob.
Bob Prime, yeah.
Yeah, and then it sort of adds all of the other Bobs, well, not all of them, but many of the other Bobs as other point of view characters, and it flicks between them. And
but presumably it's not just them all going off into space by themselves and then briefly having interactions with their clones and then sending off another Bob.
No, because as they sort of branch out into space, lots of different things end up happening. And I mean, that's one of the things this book does quite well, is balance a lot of very different storylines. Like some are sort of fun and lighthearted, and other ones are quite like a lot more serious and dark. And there's this real sort of balancing act that the book does between all those that it does pretty well.
One of the reasons you like it is this kind of tonal meld. I think it sounds like a very fascinating, like science fiction concept, like very high concept stuff.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was really surprised about, and in fact, one of the reasons I really decided to bring this here was because... I think going into this, based on like the funny name, like, he's called Bob and the title's obviously pretty funny. So you kind of expect, I guess I was expecting a Terry Pratchett or like Hitchhiker's Guide sort of funny lighthearted book. And it is funny and it is quite lighthearted for bits, but then it's also really intense and serious for a lot of it. It's like, it kind of gets to have its have its cake and eat it too. Like it, normally I'm always sort of bitching about how some sci-fi is too serious and other is too sort of silly. Like this book really somehow did both, and that was really surprising to me because I was not expecting any of the sort of serious aside to it.
Right, so it rides the line well.
Yeah, it does. It does this great job of doing both, basically, and that was why I thought it was really good to bring here, because it's a fun story that also actually has like emotional targets that it hits.
After a certain point, are all the characters just Bobs?
No, like the book maintains a good balance of having other like people. All the point of view characters are Bobs. Like it's always from a Bob's point of view, but you know, there's
Weird.
Bobs interacting with different groups of people.
Oh, right. They might interact with other like cultures and stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's not get too into what Bob finds out there in the endless expanse of space.
He finds some other life, because I think it'd be a pretty boring series if there was no other life.
Yeah, I gathered that much. Elliot.
I think there's always so much you could do there.
What is it about a guy from? I mean, when's he originally from? Like the 20th century?
21st century. These books came out, or the first one came out in like 2016, and
oh right,
it's from around that time. Like the first scene is from Bob's perspective before he dies, and he's at like a science fiction convention in Vegas. And you know, and I mean that's one of the other things. I think the book. I don't know how much this has really colored my love of the book, but you know, it's very well targeted to fans of science fiction. Like Bob is an engineer who's really into sci-fi and like
right. Does he make analogies to things that he finds based on contemporary pop culture references?
There's lots of sci-fi references, and I'd be lying if I said I understood most of them.
Oh gosh.
Like a lot of them are very Star Trek specific, and as someone who's never seen any Star Trek except for the reboot movies,
the best Star Trek medium from what I've heard.
So I definitely didn't get all of the Star Trek ones, but there's a lot of pretty generic sci-fi ones that I think most people would get.
Right, but we got off a bit of a tangent. But what I was trying to get at was what like makes him suitable to be an artificial intelligence if he's just shot some guy from 2016.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So he was a software engineer. And so
they don't have those in the future.
Well, that's sort of a thing the book goes into as to why they picked an already frozen software engineer as opposed to a modern one. That is sort of addressed in the book, but I mean, from a more meta perspective, it's obviously because you want to have a character who's from our time, because it makes the book a lot more
You want
relatable.
the audience surrogate who's kind of adapting to the future.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I guess I was, you know, sort of talking about Bob for a lot, because when you're going to have a whole book series based solely around where like 90% of the main characters are the one character.
One guy.
he obviously has to stack up.
How different are the clones? Are they like? Do they have personality differences, or it's like proper clones?
No. There's personality differences, and there's sort of a couple of different reasons for that. Like obviously the books take place over a fairly long period of time, so there's like divergence for starters. Right. But no, there's differences between the Bobs, because you're right. Again, that would be pretty boring, I think, after a while if they all just agreed on everything all the time.
So there's like divergent evolution of consciousnesses of Bobs.
Yeah.
Man, that actually does sound kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, I think one thing I was surprised about, apart from just like the seriousness and quality of this book, was I did kind of assume that if it was going to have sort of a thematic core, it was going to be the whole sort of, you know, if I'm copying myself, what does that mean about me? Like, you know, very orphan black, like the human soul.
Yeah.
All of that.
What is consciousness? What is a person?
Yeah. And
is a person shaped by birth or by events around them? You know.
Yeah, exactly. Nature versus nurture, all that, and I was surprised with how not a focus that is in the books. Like it comes up obviously, because it'd be weird if it didn't come up at all. But I'd say like the core sort of thing that this book talks about is like, you know, what does it mean to be human? Like that sort of sci-fi bread and butter. Like there's a lot more focus on what does it mean about him being a human if he's now a computer, and
if he's not a human.
Yeah. And you know, when they meet some aliens, it's like, well, what does this aspect of this alien race say about like humanity, and it's much more about talking about humanity in general rather than on a more individual level. So I quite enjoyed that as a theme, because it was just a bigger step than just dealing with the most obvious sort of fodder.
It is a great concept because as you explain it to me, my mind is already like thinking of all these great possibilities that I don't know if they're in the book or not, but like will be so fascinating to explore as concepts in this situation. Like if everyone you know is just a clone of yourself, what do friendships look like? What do romantic relationships look like?
Yeah, no, those all come up. Actually, like that's one of the things the books get to do, because there's a few of them and they're spread out. Like I think the first 3 books take place over just over 100 years or something. So it's
oh, that's a long timeline. Okay,
yeah. And so like it gets to explore a lot of different plots within that, because not only can it just like if it's very clear if the author has thought of like a new plot line, he's usually got like 30 bobs that he's launched off into space that he can just pick one and say, well, that one's doing this storyline.
Okay, here's a plot. Okay, how many books in are we?
So there's 3, and they sort of form a trilogy. Like sort of by the end of the 3rd one, most of the sort of big plot lines have really sort of rounded out. But he has said he's writing he's writing a 4th to come out soon, and he'll probably do more. The author Dennis E. Taylor, this is the series that's really sort of put him on the map. And I think when he was writing the first 2, maybe even the 3rd one, he was just writing part-time and working part-time.
Right.
And it's only in the last 6 months or so, I think, that he's actually switched to being a full-time writer. So
good on him. It's always good to hear of somebody making it, getting their dream.
Yeah, exactly. So I think
hopefully it's his dream.
Yeah. Well, according to his blog, he's excited about it, but his wife is less so. But yeah, I think
he's just clone himself. Get a new spouse.
Yeah, so I think he's redoing his original book that was before the Bobiverse series, because it didn't really do that well, and he thinks now that he's got more writing experience, he can improve it. So I think he's doing that, and then he's coming back to the Bobiverse for a bit.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'd say so. I think before you go in, there's sort of one thing I do want to warn you about, because it kind of bothered me, which is just don't. There's a tendency, at least I had at the start, to try and follow the timeline, and more importantly, like all of the space-time stuff very closely.
Right.
Just give up before you hurt yourself, because what sort of happens is the story isn't necessarily told chronologically. Like it is within a certain bob, but like he might be with one bob in the year 3272, and then he'll cut to another bob like 10 years earlier, but because of like light speed delay, their communications are all sort of off and whatever. So it's like the timeline becomes very difficult to follow.
And presumably it doesn't matter if you follow it or not. You're just really following the plots of the different Bob colonies.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll intermingle or whatever. Like, and when they start to communicate and stuff, you can just sort of trust it lines up. I think at first I was trying to like make sure I understood exactly where every Bob was at every time, and it was about towards the end of the first book where I was like, what am I doing? Like, this is just causing me pain. But the hardest part of that is the Bobs don't have a tendency to rename the star systems. So the book and the Bobs refer to them by their these are all real star systems. Like obviously the authors invented.
Oh no! So they've just got like ZXP342 or whatever.
Well, it's not quite that bad, but yeah, it's like one Bob is based in Delta Eridani and the other one's based in Epsilon Eridani, and there's another one based in like Omicron squared Eridani, and I think like overall you do fine, but I definitely had moments even in the second or third book where one Bob would reference the Bobs over in Delta Eridani, and I'm like, wait, is that this Bob or
and they've
the
all
other
got
Bob?
the same fucking names, so you really can't.
That was probably the thing that sort of bothered me the most as I got started was trying to keep up with everyone. But I think if you just give up
through the whole who's on first nature of it.
Yeah, so just sort of enjoy each story on its own as it cuts between them, and don't worry about how the timeline's lining up, because they do. And like fans have made timeline things that you can look at that don't help because they're so confusing.
Right. So do you get the sense that, what was his name? Dennis something.
Dennis E. Taylor.
Right, that he just didn't really give a shit about it.
No, because in fact, the original sort of timeline image is from him, and I think because he was an engineer before being an author, so it's all sort of in his head, and like he has in his personal
plots out
notes
the details.
Yeah, he has in his personal notes how it all lines up. It's more just trying to follow it as you're reading is a bit much. And when you try to look it up to see the timeline, there's spoilers in the timeline because I spoiled one thing for myself.
Can't win. Okay, well, I'm sold. I can't wait to dive into some of these weird socio-political or like social impacts of everyone that you know being a clone of yourself. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah. There's a lot of really interesting directions this book gets to take because there's so many of the main character.
Yeah.
And it's funny how you'd think just having it all being one character would limit it. And instead it kind of actually lets the author explore lots of different things because it's all from a very similar people's perspective.
It sounds like it will get very deep on like a study of this character, and you really get to explore his flaws and his strengths. And I mean, I don't know, but this is what it would sound like to me.
No, you kind of do. And I mean, because obviously, like, Bob has to be interesting. I've already sort of touched on this, but, like, if Bob wasn't interesting, the whole series would fall flat because...
Yeah, sure.
He is the
series.
Because
he's the character.
Like, so I don't know. Cool. Because I could see not everyone liking him as much as I do. I found him very agreeable, personally. I think, like, because he has a lot of opinions on things, and I think I agreed with him on almost all of them. So I don't know how much that has coloured how much I got into this series. Like maybe if you're someone who has a very different moral code to me and Bob, you'd be more off-put.
Elliot, are you just a Bob clone here trying to spread the good word?
This whole podcast was part of my long-term plan.
Your
as
long-term
computer
replication plan. Cool. Yeah, well, I'm keen to read it. I will read it, and then we will be back in 2 weeks to talk about it, and I'll let you know what I thought, and I'll let you, the audience, know what I thought, I suppose.
Yeah, and let us know too, audience.
Yeah, actually, audience, if you want to let us know what you think of the show, you can check out our discussion threads. There will be the discussion thread for this very book linked in the show notes just down below. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook if you want to interact with the show. You could also help us out by leaving us a review on iTunes, which would be a great help to us. Our website, which is mediamdpodcast.com, has links to do all of those things I just mentioned, as well as links to discussion threads. What else is on there? Little fun games. You can help clean up the oceans by dragging trash into little trash cans. And it also contains all the previous clues for the Media MD ARG. You can help us figure out just who is Dr. MD and why is his zones so full of clones. Elliot, why don't you tell the listeners this week's clue?
Bone.
Bone. And we'll see you next week.